Okay, everyone, welcome back to the Caring Conference. I'm thrilled and delighted to introduce you to my colleague and friend Keith. He's going to help us with our finances. Keith, transform our pocketbook.
We'll see if we can help you there. Welcome, everybody. Today, I would like to discuss ways that you can take control of your financial future. Specifically, we'll look at 5 things that every woman or person actually needs to know about investing, because I know we have some gentlemen on the call as well on the presentation. Women have made incredible strides, both professionally and personally, in the last half century. They're better educated, have greater responsibility in the workforce, and are often leaders in the household. Women no longer are just spouses or inheritors, but are wealth creators as well as decision makers. Women have more purchasing and decision-making power than ever before. And with all this progress, you're now the breadwinners in over 40% of the households. And this represents almost a 4-fold increase from 1960. Nearly 66% of you, of your ages, of those aged 40 to 79, have experienced a major financial transition, including being thrust into a caregiving role, career changes, divorce, death, inheritances, new business ventures, and retirement. These changes are inevitable and often accompanied by uncertainty about financial matters. In addition, women's engagement in financial decision-making has increased. Nearly 96% of you share in or are primarily in charge of the financial decisions in your household. The roles vary from household to household, but almost all of you are involved in some way. And 90% of you will be financially responsible for your family or yourself at some point in your life. We're going to talk about the 5 things that women should know about investing. First of all, you have instinctive investor skills. It's imperative that you put those skills to work sooner rather than later. The book John Gray wrote back in the early 90s, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We just think differently. So we're going to go over how that looks in terms of investing. Life's other priorities can impact your plan. You're more likely to take time out of the workforce to care for a loved one. So you need to be prepared. You need to start to prepare now for time away. Investing for a family also adds complexity. You'll need to be aware of and prepare for life's curveballs. Now, genetics are in your favor. As a woman, you need to account for living longer and plan your financial future accordingly. Finally, partnering with an expert has benefits. You're going to hear a lot over today's presentations about how important it is for you to be willing to ask for help. And asking for help with a financial strategy, likewise, may help you reach your goals. Okay, so you have instinctive investor skills and should start putting those to work right now. In general, you may be further ahead of the curve than you think when it comes to investment philosophy. That's because as a woman, you likely have positive investor traits that will help keep you on the right track. When compared to the opposite sex, you are less likely to take financial risks. You tend to have a long-term outlook, meaning that when you invest, you buy and hold. In fact, men tend to trade. I think I skipped go back here. I'm sorry about that. In fact, men tend to trade stocks 45% more often than women. Women tend to be less reactionary with financial news. If you hear about some market volatility, you won't immediately go to your computer or financial advisor and request a trade. This is a positive investor trait because most investors are looking to reach long-term goals, not just win or lose based on the current market. Famed investor Warren Buffett is famous for saying, the best time to buy is when the market is open, and if you find the right stock, the best time to sell is never. And that crockpot set it and forget it type strategy tends to work best in the long term. Now, men tend to focus on competitive investing, wanting to come in first or accumulating more. Women tend to focus more on goals, long-term planning, and preserving the money they invest. In fact, 77% of you view money in terms of what it can do for your families. It's not simply about accumulating money, but how money can serve you and meet the needs of those you love. Whether not staying one way is better than the other, well, not saying one way is better than the other, it is a significant difference that has impact over your lifetime. So even with these innate traits, 41% of you still say that you know less than the average investor. Now, there was a study before when asked if people felt that they were a better than average driver, 78% of folks said that they felt that they were a better than average driver, which statistically is just impossible. At least women know, a lot of women know that they know less than the average investor. Compare that to men, only 23% of men say they know less than the average investor. So this overconfidence leads to mistakes that are made. Many people avoid doing things they don't understand. Now, this may mean you keep money in cash rather than investing. And though cash may feel like it has zero risk, even with low inflation, the purchasing power of cash declines over time. If you've been listening to the news and watching the markets, or if you've even filled up your car or gone to the grocery store, you know that the impact of inflation on the dollars you have can be significant, especially recently. So we want to make sure that we're not sitting on cash that's going to automatically lose purchasing power at 7-8% as we have right now. We want to see if we can keep pace with inflation. Now let's look at how keeping your money on the sidelines may cost you. For the 10-year period ending December 31st of 2018, if you had invested $200 a month into a hypothetical moderate risk portfolio versus holding it in cash, you'd be looking at an additional $11,214. Now you can see that difference between investing versus holding assets in cash. Let's look at your long-term investing power when compared to your male counterpart. And here's why you need to care. Create an investment plan and start putting your money to work for you. You've probably heard of the wage gap, where a woman working full-time makes on average $55,000 per year to a man's $75,000 per year. But what you need to think about is how this impacts investing power. Let's say you both invest the same percentage, 10% of your salary, and that you both get an annual salary increase of 3%. Okay. If you both invested in a portfolio that generated a 7% average return, at the end of 30 years, your male counterpart would have $379,000 compared to your $257,000. Now, you heard of the wage gap. This is the what we call the gender investing gap. Now that you understand the gap, you need to plan accordingly. You don't have the instinctive investor skills, but don't be afraid to dip your toes into the investment pool. Here's some ideas that can make it a little less intimidating. First, again, ask for help. Work with a financial advisor who can help you through putting those instinctive investor skills to work and guide you through investing for the long term. Second, we want to reevaluate your cash allocations, how much you're holding in cash, to see if it could be better put to use elsewhere if it invested. Third, you want to continue contributing to your 401k or other retirement accounts, an IRA. Be sure to check on those investment allocations and rebalance as necessary, because things change at different rates, and what your initial target balance for your risk tolerance is may shift, more aggressive or more conservative depending on how those accounts, the investments within the accounts, perform relative to one another. Finally, educate yourself, beware of the gender investing gap that we just spoke about, and make any necessary changes to the amount that you invest into your retirement account. Advocate for yourself and for your work Don't be afraid to ask for an increase in pay and invest in your future accordingly. Another factor that can in fact impact your financial future is time away from the workforce. Let's look at how life's other priorities can impact your plan. Now, women are more likely to take time out of the workforce to care for a loved one, usually a child or an ailing family member. 27% of you will stay at home to care for your children, while 23.7% will decide to cut back and just work part-time. 17.5% of you are unemployed, so you can spend time caring for a loved one, while 19.7% will work part-time in a caregiving role. Being out of the workforce might be the right choice, but it's important to understand the potential impact that an extended absence could have on your long-term goals and what may need to be done to make up for that time away when you return. Whether you personally grappled with a decision like this or know someone who has, it's an incredible personal decision that's both emotionally and financially taxing for families. But knowing what to prepare for financially while you're out of the workforce can help. Since you're more likely than your spouse, brother, father, etc., to take time out of the workforce to care for others, let's look at how that time away can impact you financially. Calculating the impact of the time out of the workforce can be quite challenging. It's not as simple as multiplying your last salary by the length of time you aren't working. That's just the tip of the iceberg. When we look below the surface, we can see that oftentimes you may earn less upon re-entering the workforce while transitioning from part-time back to full-time. This impacts your overall salary growth over the rest of your career. Plus, when you aren't working, you can't contribute to your 401k or most other retirement plans, which impacts your retirement earnings and balances over your careers. Also, your Social Security and medical benefits could also be affected, not to mention the gap it will leave on your resume, the promotions you may miss, the gap in your workplace knowledge that you may experience when returning, and networking opportunities among colleagues. Let's look at some of the examples of the financial impact away from the workforce may have over time. Take a look at Jennifer. Jennifer is a 45-year-old nurse manager. She quit her job to care for her father who's battling prostate cancer. He's now in remission. She's ready to return to work. She wants to know the long-term impact her time away had on her salary growth and her retirement plans. Her goal is to retire in 20 years, and she wants to know if this will still be possible. In this example, we're going to assume that when she quit, her annual salary was $85,000, and she was contributing 8% to her 401k with an employer match of a generous 6%. Her 401k balance at the time was $100,000, and her previous position when she took time off was filled. So when she's rehired as a bedside nurse, she finds out she's making $15,000 less than when she left. It's nice that she has a job waiting for her, but it's not quite the same as what she had. To calculate her catch-up, though, she has to look beyond her salary. She needs to add in 401k contributions, matches, investment earnings, and salary increases. Then she needs to compound that over 20 years that she plans to be in the workforce. When all of the calculations are completed, a 1 year out of the workforce will have a total impact of $30,800 in salary growth and an additional $92,000 in 401k growth over those 20 years. Now, these figures assume that Jennifer is invested in a moderate portfolio made up of 35% bonds, 60% stocks, and 5% cash, your traditional 60-40 type portfolio. And if that doesn't make sense, give me a call. We can talk about establishing or setting up portfolios later. Amanda is a 35-year-old marketing manager making $75,000 a year until she had her second child 5 years ago. She and her spouse decided to leave work part-time, to have her work part-time at $45,000 for 5 years until their second child enters kindergarten, at which point she would go back to work. Let's see what the impact of her working part-time over 5 years and how this may impact her plans to retire at the age of 65. This example assumes she starts with her 401k balance with 75,000 and contributes also 8% of her annual salary with a 6% employer match. We also assume an annual salary increase of 3% annually. Based on this information, in 5 years, she's missed out on $34,800 in salary growth and $19,000 in her overall 401k balance. Now, in year 6, she returns to work full time at her salary of 75,000. So over the course of 30 years, she'd be looking out at missing $25,000 in annual salary growth. However, her 401k balance would be $212,000 less than if she were to stay in the workforce full time. Now, you may think Jennifer and Amanda's chances of retiring at 65 are not very good. It may seem like their only options are maxing out their 401k contributions or pushing out their retirement age. However, there are things that you can do in preparation for the time away from the workforce, such as open a spousal IRA, make a 401k allocation adjustment, or make annual increases to your 401k contributions. First of all, let's talk about a spousal IRA. If you're married and you have plan to take time out of the workforce, you can contribute to a spousal IRA subject to certain conditions if your spouse has earned income for the contribution year that exceeds the amount of your contribution. The maximum 2022 annual contribution is $6,000 for those under 70, which is the same as what it was in 2021. If you're over 50, there's an additional $1,000 you can contribute to a spousal IRA, even if you weren't working. Let's suppose Cindy took 5 years out of the workforce to care for her mother. Her spouse contributed $6,000 to a spousal IRA that was invested in a moderate portfolio. She'd contribute a total of $30,000 over those 6 years to her spousal IRA. But because she invested in a moderate portfolio, she'd be looking at a total of $104,600 over 20 years in the spousal IRA. Keep in mind that contributing to IRAs do have income restrictions, as well as tax considerations. You want to consult with your financial advisor to see if a spousal IRA is suitable for you in your unique situation. Another idea is to revisit your 401k or other retirement investment account with your financial advisor to ensure your portfolio is properly allocated. Increasing the amount of risk taken may be scary, but it also may help you reach your investment goals. Let's look at the cumulative returns over a 25-year period based on 2 different allocations. And an allocation is just your recipe of what ingredients go into your investment pie. Over 25 years, more aggressive asset allocation, though when holding more stocks, would have provided an additional 340% in more cumulative returns. That said, the more aggressive allocation isn't necessarily the right investment for you. It depends on life factors like your current age and how long you plan to be before you retire. Working with a financial advisor can help you figure out the correct allocation for your specific situation. Now, we know that when we retire, we don't necessarily stop living. We stop working, but we don't stop living. So even though you retire at, we'll say 65, if you end up living till 90, you'll still have another 25 years worth of living that needs to be paid for with those savings. So we don't want to be too conservative and run out of money before we run out of months. Now, a little bit can go a long way when it comes to long-term investing. Let's talk about increasing your 401k contributions by just 1% per year. Over time, with compounding factors such as merit increases, a 1% increase can add up. Let's look at someone making $65,000 a year at the age of 35. Assuming they're contributing 6% to their 401k at that time, they start increasing that contribution by 1% annually. In both situations, they're receiving a 6% annual employer match, which stays static, and an annual merit increase of 3% and a starting balance of $75,000 at the age of 35. In this scenario, the person who increases their 401k contribution by 1% per year will be looking at an additional $264,000 in their 401k at the end of 30 years versus just holding it steady at that 6% over the same time period.
Keith, I just want to give you a heads up. You've got
About
just
5
about,
minutes.
yeah, you've
Got it.
got just about 3 minutes. And actually, there's a question from someone in the chat too, that
Okay,
I just want to quickly ask you, and you can
yes.
kind of weave it in. So she's wondering about your discussion around the pay gap between men and women. And she's just wondering, is the pay gap because we spend time out of the workforce or because we're paid less, or both?
Because we're paid less. Well, because they're paid less, that has the impact in not being able to put as much away. So
Okay.
it's something that we're working on as I think as a community or as a nation, but it's still a reality at this point.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
So adding for a family, work with your husband, your spouse, your partner, so you're on the same page, because we never know when something may happen to one of you. And we want to make sure both of you are aware of what your plans are. We're going to skip having children right now in the different of time. Striking a balance between college and savings. We can help you with that as well. We know it's difficult to plan for college. I've got 2 in college right now, and another one starts next year. So I know firsthand how that works. Once college is over, we can transfer those contributions that we would normally make to college into retirement savings plans, so we can make up for that time that we missed out on that. Finally, genetics are in your favor. Chances are you're going to live longer than men. The oldest person to ever live was a woman. She died at 122 years, 164 days. Out of the 20 oldest people to ever live, 19 of them were women. Out of the oldest 100 people to ever live, 94 of those were women. So there's a pretty good chance you're going to be outliving your spouse. Even though there's a 5-year gap on life expectancy, women tend to be about 2.5 years younger than their husband when they get married. So plan on at least 7 years more past your husband. Now, that oldest woman we talked about, her husband died at age 67. And so she lived over 55 years as a widow by herself. I know my own grandmother lost, my grandfather passed away in 1973. She never remarried, and she lived from age 63 through 96, 33 years as a widow by herself. In order to plan for retirement, the majority of what we have is going to be savings. Social Security creates a big portion. You need to have a plan, and we can help. A financial advisor can help you identify what is the best Social Security strategy for you and your husband. The earlier you pick, the less you get. And once you choose your Social Security payout amount, it's locked in for the rest of your life. So we need to make sure that we do this right. The impact when one of the spouses dies is the larger of the 2 Social Security payments continues on for the surviving spouse for the remainder of their life. So this can be something that can have an impact of hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional income potentially over your lifetime. Just as a final follow-up, we won't go over this one here. Partnering with a financial advisor has benefits. You don't have to be super rich. We're not that expensive. We'll help you figure out what needs to be done. We won't just tell you to stop spending money and put it in your investment account. We can help with other things besides your retirement. If you want to buy a house, pay for college, plan for long-term care, we'll go ahead and work with you. It's a partnership because your life changes. We need to be aware of that. It's not just set it and forget it. So we flew this pretty quickly, but as a summary, you have instinctive investor skills. Life's other priorities can impact your plan. Investing for a family adds complexity. Genetics are in your favor. And again, partnering with an expert who's been down this road before has benefits to you. With that, I appreciate your time and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Keith. I'd love for you to go into the chat room. There's been comments and questions that I'd love for you.
I will do so. I will follow up with them directly.
Yeah, that would be great. And we have a gift that you are offering to our attendees, and we're just getting a name for the gift of Keith's 1-hour financial planning consultation. And I want to let you know that Heather also has a gift for our attendees, and that is a swag bag from No Barriers. And Trudy Whittington, you have won the swag bag, and Heather will be in touch with you next week to get your address. And then Keith will get a name for you as well so that you can follow up. Okay, everybody, we're going to take a 7-minute break. We're going to come back at top of the hour, and Kathy Murray is going to help us be our own good, actually best friend. Okay, thanks so much, Keith.
Thank you.